morning. All the switches have been pushed, the dials have been adjusted, and we welcome you to Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Mrs. Busby, we have a great personality this morning. We're going to get to that gentleman pretty shortly now. The gentleman will remember that we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two, maybe, something going on in the community. Well, in little Jimmy Ash's hometown, I rolled up here last Monday morning, Memorial Day morning, and I went to the fire station and for a nice pancake and sausage breakfast, and I never saw such expensive pies in my life. They auctioned off as fundraisers for the Boy Scouts and the fire station. Well attended. I'm sure, Jim, you ought to be proud of your home folks up here. They're well attended. And I watched them auction off pies. My goodness. $70 for a pie.
Oh, yeah.
And the big
but it was a good pie.
Well, the interesting thing about as you and I talk about, Judith, it's the community spirits that we have going around in our communities around Lincoln. And I saw one individual buy at least 3 pies, and that'd probably average out to somewhere about $150 time they all got done. Community spirit. And so kudos to those folks. And now, if I may, Mr. Dalpoas, I'd like to go to the 200 and the 300 block on Peoria Street and give some kudos out. A few years ago, I put notices in all the mailboxes in those couple of blocks, encouraging them to fly their flags on the appropriate occasions. And the vaccination pretty well took. We didn't have quite 100%. We're going to work on that for Flag Day, which is coming up here June 14th. But the preponderance of the houses had these flags flying on the sidewalks. Looked really neat. And I took a picture and put it out on Facebook, and boy, did I get response to that.
Did you?
Yes, a lot of response to that.
It was so beautiful. Not the flags that you fly on your house all the time, but these shorter ones, that are maybe, 15, 18 inches tall, and then put them sporadically down your sidewalk.
No, and systematically, not sporadically, systematically.
Systematically, excuse me. I stand corrected. But if you stand at the end of this street and look down, it just was beautiful. I interrupted you as usual. I'm so sorry.
Well, watch it, will you, please? I
try to
speak to the management about your operations.
I'm just not working out today at all.
Oh, size. Speaking of the size of flags, the other day, we have some remarkable government employees. The other day, I watched the federal director of the prison systems in the United States. It would be border to border and coast to coast, all the federal prisons. What the hearing was, I have no idea. They have daily hearings out there, and nobody knows what the heck's going on anyway. But this gentleman was, I use that word loosely perhaps. Anyway, this bureaucrat was being queried by one of America's stalwart senators, Al Franken from your town. And in any event...
That tickled you, didn't it, Jim?
The idiot asked a question. The gentleman asked a question. Well, what is the average size of a cell in the prison systems? And the guy looked at him like a deer in the headlights. He said, I didn't understand the question. Well, how big are the cells that the prisoners live in? Then he thought, and he said, 4 by 6.
That'd be smaller than that desk.
Yeah. Now, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a bureaucrat, the director of the prison system of the United States of America, USA.
Yeah.
So, all right, we've done all that now. Why don't we get down to serious business? Because we have an organization in this town that fulfills a wonderful need. And I just toss the baton to you.
Oh, gosh, yes. Don Dalpoas is the director of the Oasis here. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. And they've got so many things going on out there. And far afield from the Oasis, they just all got back from New York. 100 and how many, Dom?
104 folks took the scary trip out to New York City.
It must have been like herding butterflies.
Well, it had presented its own challenges. We had some problems, but overall, the
There's
trip was very
Busbyism.
nice.
Oh, I think that is the most wonderful thing, and I have lots of friends who went with you.
And survived.
And they're back and in good shape, you bet. But there's always something going on. In fact, I had a friend stop yesterday who's been teaching bridge out there to a group, along with another friend. And she also goes out there to exercise in the mornings. And there is something going on all the time. And meals. Lots of meals you have during the month.
Yeah, we tried to vary our program strategy since we now have a brand new facility on 2810 Woodlawn Road, and we have a nice.
Pull that mic a little forward.
Pardon me?
Pull your mic a little closer.
I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
A beautiful, nice parking area, and so we've tried to take advantage of that by inviting more and more folks out to participate in various activities. In order to do that, you have to have a wide array of activities to stimulate one's ideas of whether or not they should come out and should participate and should do those kinds of things. So we don't have any problem with parking and stuff. And I think you hit upon a couple. We have some that we do have going that you didn't mention was that we have a gardening class and we have a book club and we have a very sundry of other little classes, bead class and things of those natures that we're trying to develop and trying to get more interest in from the public and just to come out and see what's going on. Our exercise class is actually, it's not a class, so to speak, it's an exercise area. And when we were creating the building or remodeling the building, the big question was, how much space do you devote to physical exercise for seniors? Knowing full well that when we were downtown, we have although we try, we have very limited participation, but it's a need that seniors really, we thought, would enjoy. So we went out and took this risk and put this room up, and the great thing about the exercise is that none of the machines plug into the wall. None of the equipment. It's all
manual,
driven by your own power. So you don't have to worry.
At your own speed.
At your own speed. So you don't have to worry about a machine going too fast or the equipment taxing you. You just go to your limit and then you stop. Right now we have right at 200 or a little more people participating on a fairly regular basis in that particular area. So,
you know, Dominic, as I've been in and out of there from time to time, the thought occurred to me that notwithstanding all the worry and angst and terribly concerned after the fire, which was, of course, a total disaster, that may have been a fortuitous fire in the long run, in so far as it applies to the advantages our seniors are now enjoying out there.
At the time when I got the call and I was going down to put out the fire, so to speak, because I thought it was just a false alarm. And watching that building burn, it does something to you internally and otherwise. But as you indicated, Bill, we really, the board, I give all the credit to the board members. They're all volunteers, and they really took that as a challenge, and they met that head on, and they did. And I've said this over at various other speaking engagements. The facility that we have here in Logan County for seniors is, you can go to the Chicago area, you can go down to the very Marion areas of the world, the very Carbondales, and in between. And you won't really find a better senior center than what we have here for Logan County seniors. So it's been really a very fortuitous type event for us. I mean, even though it was disastrous at the time, it was something that we made quite a bit of strides for the seniors.
Well, over and above the physical plant, which you now enjoy, you and your staff, it seems to me like there's nobody just sitting around staring into space out there. Well, what are we going to do next week? There's always some ongoing planning. And there's a lot of organization skills going on out there that we don't know anything about. All we know is we walk through the door and this is going on and that's going on. But those things don't happen without something making them happen. You just furnish a lot for a lot of people out there.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, and so does the staff, by the way. And really, there's 2 paid staff people out at the facility. All the rest of the things that happen there are through the volunteers and the volunteer efforts. Without that, I mean, they are the absolute lifeblood of the community and of the center. Is the people that want to give of themselves, they want to give of a talent. People that know bridge and want to share that talent and can teach that talent to others. People that know gardening. People that know how to do various other aspects that can help seniors. People who know about dietary intake and whether you should have 1 Krispy Kreme or 2 Krispy Kremes or how many you should have during the day. Yes.
Or none.
Or none. Those are the kinds of folks that share their talents with many others and make those programs that you're talking about that happen. So,
but I have some acquaintanceship with the volunteer business.
Yeah, I guess you do.
From a number of years.
There's a girl, Miss Volunteer herself.
That's a job in itself, to recruit volunteers. How do you come by them? Does somebody say, I have a friend who makes really good pie crust, and they'd be willing to teach that out here, or whatever?
Well, there's a
Where
couple,
do you
3
get
ways.
them?
Well, actually, I'm not sure who puts them on our doorstep exactly. Maybe a higher authority than all of us puts them on our doorstep, but they get to our doorstep. And during the membership day, we have a listing of things that perhaps you have some knowledge in or you have some expertise in and you are willing to volunteer for. We recruit that way. We also recruit by email where we're promoting a certain thing. Anyone that has a particular talent in that arena, if they would let us know. Lots of people have lots of talents. They're just somewhat hesitant to share what they have with others. But once you get into a particular organization and you understand what's going on and no one's exactly belittling you or you feel comfortable with that, then you get more, and then the cycle begins. Once you get more, then people talk to them among themselves, and you foster more volunteers. We always need additional volunteers, I can tell you that. There's never, quote, enough.
Oh, right.
You mentioned email, Dom. And I know that way back in the old days at the old facility, you had computer classes for folks. Mm-hmm. And a lot of seniors may want to at least avail themselves of the opportunity to do something, but they don't know what on the computers. And you still offer instructions. You have some volunteers that help folks learn that. You have a regular computer room.
Yeah, we have Cindy Stover. Cindy taught at the high school for several years and was in the administration there. She's our instructor for that particular class. In fact, she's introducing a Facebook class, just how to do this Facebook thing. You mentioned it earlier when we were just out discussing before we got in, and I'm totally ignorant of it and scared of it and all of those sorts of things, but they're and I'm really going to be in on those classes because I want to see what's coming up, what's happening in the world, and how you can communicate socially with others and what have you. So, but yeah, we have she teaches computer class, she teaches basics, she teaches an advanced class. So it's all in the idea of seniors getting more aware of their environment, more aware of what's happening around them, more technologically savvy. My wife, had no skills and took one of the classes, and now she's an iPad wizard. I mean, she goes all around and does whatever she does on her iPad, so she's very good at that.
Bill is like that too, and he's got one of each. What do you call them?
I have an iPhone, an iPad, and then an iMac.
Anything that has an I in front of it, he has.
And they're all interconnected.
And he knows how to work them.
If I take your picture here, when I get home, it'll be on my computer.
Isn't that something?
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
But I'm with you. I know nothing. I've had children and grandchildren. They know what it is. They can take care of it.
Honestly, that's somewhat the case. I mean, when I left my former job and retired, so to speak, and went to the Oasis, I had no typing skills. I had no computer skills whatsoever. So I managed to self-teach somewhat, and they're a miracle on I mean, they're just wonderful. I don't know how I would even be able to function now without a computer. So you graduate.
It's so, just a case in point. When I prepare for Viewpoint, which is not a heck of a lot of preparation, except to make sure our guests know we're coming and all that they're coming and all of that. But there's one thing I always try to do, and that is look up a quote or comment that pertains to the subject matter. It's so simple on the computer.
Sure.
Last night, senior quotes, blank. Hit the key and we got all kinds of senior quotes come up here. And it's so simple. Yeah. It didn't like I go down to Claire Christie at the library there and go to
Oh, my goodness, I remember her.
I go back to Ida Webster. In any event, it is seriously so easy. Now, we kind of brushed over your trip to New York. We were talking off air this morning that you take an annual trip. You have a lot of local trips, so to speak, around in the periphery around here, Decatur, Bloomington, and so forth. Mm-hmm. But you take a trip every year with a motor coach, a charter service, and this year you chose to go, or was selected to go to New York City. Just kind of briefly tell us what all you saw out there, because in listening to Dom, I said to myself, I wish I'd have been on that, because they went to the 9/11 memorial, and I think that's worth the trip. That in itself is worth the trip out there. So, Dom, kind of touch on your trip, including some of the funny stuff.
Well, some of the funny stuff that you look back at now wasn't so funny at the time.
Life is like that.
Life's like that. It gets funnier as time goes on. And we gathered up 104 folks, and we left.
What did it cost to charter that, folks? I mean, what was their fare?
The fare was $775, and we try to do that as
cheaply as you can,
as reasonably as we can.
Not cheap.
And we entertain. There are some meals involved with that, so you're paying for some of the meals, mm-hmm. and you're paying for the gratuities for the driver and the step-on guide, and
sure.
and all that's included into that particular mm-hmm. price I was mm-hmm. quoting to you.
Fair enough.
But we had 104 folks. We left on, I think it was May 14th, and we got back on May 20th, and we spent a night in Hudson, Ohio. We actually went to Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and quaint community, smaller than Lincoln, Illinois. They have these bus things come in, and they're known for their white trout. My son went with me, and we went down to this. The Bellefonte is a beautiful fountain, or that's the reason they got the name. And there's a spring that just bubbles out of the earth.
Spring.
Yeah, it's just beautiful, and the water is just crystal clear. And these white trout are living in this stream, and it's just a beautiful, nice, quaint place. We spent the night in Hudson. However, when we were going to Hudson, our bus solenoid wire, when we were eating, broke. It snapped on the way there, but the solenoid wire is an important wire in a mechanical bus because it starts it. Mm-hmm. So
that is a good way to get going, is to start.
So when we come out, we don't have a bus in order to take us to the motel. Of course, everyone's tired. Oh. Anyway, we had a little bit of a delay. There were two buses going, so the one bus shuttled, and we all got to the hotel, and we all spent that night fairly well. But anyway, when we arrived at New York, we actually stayed in New Jersey and used the Lincoln Tunnel to get into the New York City. We saw the Statue of Liberty. We saw Ellis Island. And Ellis Island was particularly interesting to me because both sides of my family immigrated over from Italy, and to see their names and to see the stories of what these people went through is absolutely amazing. And the total amount of money, my mother's side of the family had $15 total. Now, and you could buy things for 4 and 5 cents then. Yeah. This is in 1903, 1904, late 1890s type of things. And But at any rate, to have people leave all of their belongings in a country, travel across a sea, and enter here just for the grasp of having a better life, and to see some of those stories was actually heartwarming. And see their signatures on a manifest and all that was very, very touching for myself. We saw that, and we had a wonderful tour guide. He just showed us everything that we want to know, Brooklyn Bridge, the whole thing about New York City and the various Times Square and all those kinds of things. But the most touching and the most memorable part of that trip, even though it was personally Ellis Island, in some respects, was that 9/11 museum. It was, it's worth the trip. It is truly inspiring. It's actually built in the ruins of the World Trade Center. It's in the lower level, and it shows you exactly where you're at in that center building, and then to go through that and to relive that day with all of the audio and the video that's now available, just like you were talking about the iPhones and the iPads and all that. They have audio tapes of loved ones on planes calling their homes and telling them what was happening and what they knew was going to happen. And I mean, these are things that people knew was happening to them. And people in the towers that were trapped there calling home and giving their loved ones more or less a goodbye. It was just a very, very touching and moving museum, put together extremely well.
How emotional! Oh my gracious!
It can be very very touching and emotional. It's more or less like you. If you ever had the honor or the privilege of going out to Pearl Harbor and seeing the USS Arizona, it's along those same lines. I mean, in that case, you know what's beneath you under the water there, and in the case of the 9/11 museum, just on the other side of a wall, there are remains of folks that are just on the other side of a wall they weren't able to excavate, and so it's a very touching, it's a very moving experience, and to have it all it's all pieced together, including, which I didn't know, I kind of had mixed feelings about whether or not they have actual videos of the terrorists themselves going through the security to board the plane.
Isn't that interesting?
Their communications.
Really?
Yeah, so they have that on audio.
I've not heard that before.
No, I was not aware of that.
It's really, at one point when I first went to that area of the museum, I thought, these guys don't belong here, and I had that kind of emotion and feeling about it. But the more you see the complete story of what was happening, they shared that place with many who had fallen that day. So it was, like I said, it's just if you have an opportunity, I would recommend anyone to go see that. It was
Thank you for sharing that with us, Dom. I think that should be on your bucket list, you know?
Really?
And with that, I will defer to Mr. Ash for a few minutes, and we'll kind of discuss this off air, and we'll have some commercials and get right back. Well, right back live in the studios. We appreciate the presence of Dominic Dalpoas this morning, director of our wonderful little organization out there in the west side of town called the Oasis Senior Citizen Center. Doing a great job for a lot of people. If I ever get old enough, I might spend more time out there, John, but right now I'm too busy studying for my final exams right now.
Yes, that's right. And I want you to stay studying for your final exams.
You ought to have a lot of folks out there doing that. Dom, the trip was pretty inclusive. Was it a difficult trip for some of the senior citizens physically?
Yes, it was. It was very taxing. Everything you do in New York City is on a fast pace.
Yes.
Everything was moving, and you you're getting off the motor coach. Even we had it was taking us 17 minutes to depart the motor coach, and that was all being calculated into this itinerary. And moving a motor coach, what was probably the most frustrating was moving a motor coach on Manhattan. I mean, the streets, some streets are very narrow. Traffic is atrocious.
Yes,
it's
it is.
atrocious. You know, like 18.5 million people that live in this area here, and you know, we saw Central Park, which is absolutely beautiful. This large park in the middle of this metropolis with all these buildings, and saw John Lennon where he lived in his building. Saw Jerry Seinfeld where he lived. I mean, you see all these celebrity buildings in this quote now billionaires row, where these. I have no idea what it costs to live there, but that's why you're a billionaire.
More than it costs in Lincoln.
You don't care about that sort of stuff. So, but anyway, and then we went to Little Italy and Chinatown, and those were all nice experiences as well. And Harlem. Harlem is nothing like I expected.
You see your Uncle Charlie in Little Italy?
Well, you know what? You go into those shops. In Little Italy, and the community I grew up in was very small, but we had our own little butcher shop and bakery, and some of those same aromas that they just reawakened the childhood. You know, I was there. Yeah, that's Mr. Bajoli's store. That's how it smelled. So you just remember a lot of those things. But those same types of aromas are all through Little Italy.
Now, have you folks been down to New Orleans yet to that museum?
No, we have not been to New Orleans.
Put that on your bucket list to do. And if you do that, I want to be sure and sign up.
Okay.
I did that many years ago. That's remarkable museum. And I tell any of my friends and associates and family members who are going to be in the vicinity of New Orleans to be sure and get that on their list to do. It's amazing. You know, just in the same analogy here, we have June 6th coming up here very quickly. And last night on PBS, I watched 6 or 7 veterans of 70 years ago go back to the Normandy beaches. And it was a very moving program. And to see these fellows like me and stand there and take the accolades of the descendants of those French citizens who were there 70 years ago.
Sure.
And they haven't, to this day, they're eternally grateful. And they have annual memorials over there in that area. So it's really neat. Don, if you make your plans, what is the MO? What is your modus operandi to kind of plan ahead? You and your staff sit down and have planning meetings?
We have frequent discussions. It's not so much a meeting as it is a discussion thing where we're talking about various programs and such. We do lots of research, like you said, when you have computers at your fingertip, and you can check to see what other senior centers are offering to their seniors, what the demographics in our particular area cater to in terms of what senior needs are here locally. So we have lots of statistical information at our fingertips, and we try to research part of that. We try to find, and then you get a self-awareness, so to speak. You kind of know a tolerance level for what the seniors would like to do here locally, and you just kind of go out on these little branches and you say, well, we can try to do this thing, and it becomes more of an informal kind of a thought. We have our board is broken up into 7 committees. Part of that is a program development committee, and they research and they look at what we can offer, how we can offer it, and they come up with some names that could possibly do this, that, or the other thing. We had several different exercise groups that came in and did some exercises. We've had lots of things that, out of the 1 or 2 things that you know about that do work, we probably have a dozen that didn't work, that we sent out there and we just didn't get that much response from the community in terms of folks wanting to participate in it. And that's just the way the business goes.
Well, but you have to do that. I mean, otherwise, how would you know?
Really, you don't. I mean, you got to test the waters,
It's
so to
got to be
speak.
trial and error.
Yeah, you got to test the waters, and like I said, there's about, for every one program that really catches on and does well, you have at least a dozen to more that have went by the wayside that we've weeded out because that the participation level is just non-existent
Right.
or too low.
There are a lot of folks who walk through those nice doors out there, and by the way, it's easily accessed, certainly. We just kind of maybe take things for granted without realizing that these things that we are privileged to enjoy require a lot of back-of-the-scenes planning, and we ought not to forget that. We ought not take those things for granted out there.
No, you can't really take anything for granted. Anything in our community that's offered is something that people need to cherish, and they need to be aware of, and they need to do. Just like your flag program, that's inspiring, and that's those people 70 years ago that were on the Normandy beaches did a lot for that particular flag. So those kinds of community spirit is really where it's at, and organizations that foster that cannot be taken for granted, because they just can't survive without people either becoming members and showing support that way, so that we can have an opportunity for additional grants, participate, or volunteer. Those are the three major thrusts for any really nonprofit organization that helps our community do whatever the niche is that they're geared to do.
I have to ask you a personal question. How many times do you suppose you said thank you, God, when you were going through New Jersey and New York on that bus that you didn't have to drive?
I did that generally about every 2 or 3 minutes, and our tour guide kept telling our bus driver, believe this or not, our bus driver, that was his first time in New York City.
Oh, that's scary.
First time.
What an experience that was.
I'm right there on front seat, so I could communicate with the bus driver, and you're looking straight ahead, and the tour guide is saying you have to be in the middle lane and you have to be more aggressive. And there are people that driving for rules or whatever rules are out there, don't pay attention to the rules.
They don't apply to them.
It doesn't apply to anybody. It doesn't apply to anybody. You just,
Every man for himself.
Just go. You just go, and if somebody runs into you, they'll deal with it later. You just go. That's it. It's really it's a sense in and all of itself. It was really a unique experience and kind of a wonderful experience.
See, all I'm up for is rush hour in Lincoln. That's about my limit.
That's why we keep her on Porter Street at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Who in the world has to do the logistics for this? Not you, I hope. To say how long it's going to take to get to Belafonte, Ohio, and how long it's going to take to get in Ofta.
No, we partnered with Diamond Tours. Diamond Tours moves is a large tour organization group, and they move more seniors than anybody else in the United States. So we partnered with them. They figured out all the logistics, that we're going to stay in Hudson, Ohio, that we're going to go to Belafonte, that we're going to go do this, that, and the other thing. And they figured out time schedule. And quite honestly, their time schedule is pretty doggone accurate. I mean, it's an hour trip from where we were staying to the Lincoln Tunnel. Then once you get in the Lincoln Tunnel, God help you when you get out, because it's
I'm sure that's right.
It is. It's You can have one lane going the wrong way, and you're in that lane, and
Ofta.
It's something totally different. But they have a fairly accurate time schedule, but that's a blessing and is a hindrance, because there's some things you want to see, you want to stay and see longer, and see more of, and the time schedule is such that you got to go when you got to go, type of thing.
And on these tours, inevitably, you'll always have 2 or 3 that are hanging back and never quite get back to the bus on time. It happens all the time. Every bus.
It does happen. We had that happen frequently, but by and large, the senior population have matured enough and are cognizant of others' needs, and other time schedules, that they're essentially fairly prompt on anything that we're doing, and really a lot of kudos go out to them. They were wonderful.
But I'm sure lots of your people have been on other trips, so they know the drill.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This
No,
is
that's-
my
Other
first
trips
trip.
with you, I mean.
Well, when you say with me, this is the first time I've been on one of those trips.
Well, I mean with the Oasis.
Yeah, we have a person that usually goes on all of our trips. I went because we had such a large number. We had a second bus going, and the tour company said, well, you need to send a staff person on that bus because you got such a large group in case we have problems, which we did. We had plenty of problems, and but we were over.
But nothing insurmountable, evidently. You got back.
Everybody survived, all of that sort of thing. It's just a nuisance for lots of folks. I mean, it wasn't the most. It could have been enhanced even more if we wouldn't have had all those issues. But I expected the 10% rule, where you take 104 people, you're going to have 10.4 problems per day. And we had.
Did you fulfill your requirement there?
You had
did meet our
manifestly
quota.
more.
We met our quota.
That's your big coach trip. That's your annual trip, Dominic. You take several. How many local trips around here in the periphery where you drive the Oasis bus?
The day trips, as we call the day trips,
Yes.
we usually take we try to schedule one a week. And again, we try to schedule one a week, and depending on our sign-up, if people want to go to that particular area and we get 8 folks that want to go, we're off and we're going. If we don't get the numbers because of the gas, the insurance, and all those sorts of things, we can't run that van. So, but that's essentially what we do. We try to schedule one a week. So we schedule about 50 of them a year.
That's a heck of a job.
Oh, yeah.
To find 50 places to go.
Well, our friend Mark McDonald on Illinois Stories, Channel 8, comes up with some very unique. For instance, just off the top of my head, there's a place over in Decatur called the Illinois Raptor Center.
Yes.
Wherein they take birds that have been damaged or injured or something and rehab them. And if they can, they release them back into the wild. And I don't know what they just like the others in zoos and so forth if they can't release them. But that might be of interest to seniors. Something I've never done. It's just 35 miles away over there. He comes a trip over to Quincy. My goodness, there's some gorgeous old architectural wonders over there in these old homes along the river. You could get a hold of Mark's agenda on his programs and get a lot of ideas.
Oh, yeah. That's a good thought.
He does a remarkable job, very interesting job. There's a place down below Springfield where they make pewter spoons and dishes and so forth. You can watch that. There's just a lot of things going on around here. And then, of course, you take frequent trips up to the Goodfield at the barn.
Goodfield to the barn. That's a favorite. Folks love to go there. They have a nice meal and they enjoy. Usually, it's a comedy of some sort
and
or
they
another.
do a nice job for us up there.
Yeah, they're wonderful. That's a pretty staple. We go up there 5 or 6 of these trips. I think they have 6 different programs a year. Their programs last 2 months, so we do that every time they have a different program, and it's always full.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. And do you go on most of those then?
I try to go on none of those. And the reason is not because I don't want to go. I usually drive if we're going to the ball game in September, the Cubs-Cardinals ball game. And the other volunteer driver that we have really doesn't like to drive in the big city type of thing down there in St. Louis, which is now a small city compared to New York. But anyway, so I drive that. I drive on various other occasions. But mainly, Carol is our main volunteer, and she drives the vast majority of all of our trips.
How did you get so good? Did you, when you were a young fellow, did you go to school to be a director like you are, or how did this happen to you?
If Mr. Fenolio, who was my English teacher, would have his thing to me was, he says, you line, because there were 2 exits to his classroom, and there was an exit that would go in where you could get additional education purposes, and then there was an exit that go to the gym and to the lunchroom. And he
There's
said,
an analogy.
he said, you always, meaning me, always sit next to the gym and lunchroom part of his school. He says, I hope that you never have to speak in public, and I hope you never have to write. And for whatever reason, I that newsletter there that we write, and that he would be flabbergasted.
He'd be so proud.
Well, I'm not so sure he'd even be proud, because there's a lot of commas that are out of place.
So.
But anyway, no, I would have never dreamed that I would have been put in that position, but it's something very exciting for me. It's something that's kind of it's been a career that's been well worth the time and effort.
Well, it certainly can't be boring.
No, it's not boring. It's very challenging. It's very challenging. It's something, in my mind at least, that keeps me somewhat younger than, and you hear a lot of folks that do things that interest them in their latter years, and this happens to be one thing that's of a lot of interest to me, and it keeps me younger. My wife is continually saying, you need to retire and be like all the rest of us. And I keep saying that's good for some, and it's not necessarily.
You're too young for that right now.
Yeah, well, it was. You see, your time. You know when your time comes, and you kind of go with it then. So that's.
I thought 75 was a good age to retire.
Dominic, we appreciate your taking your time. Judy and I know that you have a busy schedule, and you've always been gracious when Judy calls you and asks if you could come and be a guest here on Viewpoint. We try real hard here on Viewpoint to get different guests of different walks of life, different interests. Knowing about what you're doing out there on the west side of town at the Oasis Center is a joy for us to hear. And I would just, by the way, just mention, I noticed in your in the newsletter, which is very well done, we talk about gifts that are given to the Oasis. It probably wouldn't be difficult for me to suggest that if people find a couple extra bucks in their pocket, or making plans, and they don't have a specific plans for the future. Some people don't have families, unfortunately. The Oasis might be a great spot for to think about passing on their resources to help others. So we appreciate very much your presence. I'm going to close with this quote. The University of Nebraska, somebody's always making a study of something. The University of Nebraska said that a study that found out that people who drink beer or wine a couple of times a week have higher bone density. Well, they're going to need it because they fall more often. Thank you for Viewpoint.